All right, let's talk about something you probably don't hear every day. We all see the headlines about AI, right? But what happens when you put artificial intelligence in the same room as theology? Yeah, it sounds a little out there, but it's a surprisingly important conversation. And it turns out they might just have this really unexpected alliance. So let's dive in.
So when this topic does come up, it's almost always framed as this huge, dramatic showdown, It's always AI versus God. Is this new technology a new God? Is it here to make faith totally obsolete? That's the vibe, right? This big, epic conflict. But is that the only way to look at it? Is that even the right way?
Well, the whole idea we're exploring today is about a major shift in thinking. What if we just threw out the whole conflict narrative? Instead of seeing this as a battle for meaning, what if we looked at it as a potential collaboration, a partnership where technology isn't a threat but a tool, a really powerful tool that can actually work with faith to help people flourish? That's the journey we're going on right now.
Okay, so let's get into the current debate. How are theologians actually talking about AI right now? Well, it turns out the conversation tends to circle around a few key areas, and honestly, they're usually pretty alarming. Let's break them down.
It really boils down to four main things. First, you've got the ethical concerns, all the risks, the biases, the potential for abuse. That's usually the starting point. Then, things tend to escalate into full-on apocalyptic fears, kind of like what you'd see in a sci-fi movie. AI is this existential threat. From there, the conversation gets a lot deeper, tackling the big human question. If we can create intelligence, what does that say about us, about our own specialness, especially from a theological view, like the whole idea of being made in the Imago Dei, the image of God? And finally, you get this fork in the road. Is AI going to make religion obsolete, or is it just becoming a new kind of magic all on its own?
So if you zoom out, the whole conversation is just, well, it's framed by suspicion and fear. It's almost always on the defensive, It's a reaction against a perceived threat, instead of a proactive, curious look at what this new technology could actually mean or what possibilities it could open up.
And that brings us to the real turning point of this whole explainer. What if we've been coming at this from the completely wrong angle? What if the key isn't to answer the old scary questions, but to start asking a much, much better one?
And this quote from Lluís Oviedo really just hits the nail on the head. He says, "The main question is not what is wrong or what could go wrong. The question is rather, what can we learn?" Just think about that for a second. Instead of obsessing over all the potential negatives, what if the starting point was just curiosity? What can this teach us about being human, about our beliefs, about everything? That shift in perspective is absolutely huge.
So, asking that new question leads to this idea of a collaborative model. It's about moving away from what some thinkers call a hermeneutic of suspicion, which is a fancy way of saying an approach that's built on distrust, and moving towards something more like a charity interpretation. You're actively looking for common ground. In this model, AI and theology aren't enemies in a ring, they're more like partners with different skills working on the same project.
And okay, this whole collaborative model, it's not just some nice-sounding theory. This is where it gets super interesting, because there are actual, concrete ways this is already happening. Let's look at some of the really surprising ways AI is becoming a brand new tool for theologians.
I mean, think about this. AI can sift through enormous amounts of ancient texts and find connections and patterns that a single person could never spot in 100 lifetimes. It can check the logic of really dense philosophical arguments for belief. It can process huge data sets on how people experience and perceive religion today. It can even help figure out who wrote certain classical texts. It's basically the ultimate research assistant. It does all the heavy lifting, all the data crunching, freeing up scholars to focus on the big picture. What does it all mean?
There's a really great way to put this. AI could be an assistant in the process of believing. That phrase is perfect, right? It's not here to replace faith or do the believing for you. It's a tool that can help us make sense of things, to clarify, to analyze, and to organize all the incredibly complex ideas and texts that faith is built on. It could actually help us understand our own beliefs even better.
Okay, so if we take this collaborative idea and run with it, what does that future actually look like? How can these two huge forces, technology and theology, not just, tolerate each other, but actually work together in a way that benefits all of us?
Well, it leads to this really smart concept called task distribution. It's basically about letting each one do what it does best. Technology is amazing at solving practical problems, right? It's about health, transport, productivity. It answers the how questions. Theology, on the other hand, deals with the spiritual stuff, meaning, purpose, the big why questions. It provides context. They're not competing.
They're working on totally different but equally important parts of the human experience.
And in this model, theology isn't just sitting on the sidelines thinking about the afterlife. No, it has a really active role to play. It can help guide how we develop and use technology. By keeping us focused on a bigger vision for the common good and what it means to live well, it can help us ask, is this new tech really contributing to our sustainable well-being, or is it just a shiny new toy that might cause more problems down the road?
And all of this leaves us with a really provocative final thought. As technology gets better and better at solving our practical problems, what happens when we don't really need to pray for a good harvest or for a cure to a common cold because technology has it covered? It kind of forces faith to get really clear on its purpose. So the question is, what is the new core purpose of faith in a world where technology handles all the practical stuff? That's the big question this collaborative future is pushing us to answer.